This one's Small Town, Big Dream. Steve Langston is an entrepreneur from Onondaga, Manitoba, where he lives with his wife, Reghan, and children Taylor and Tori. He is a graduate from Assiniboine Community College and University of Lethbridge with a Bachelor of Management. Since 2010, he has run Dirty T-Shirt Productions, a digital marketing company, and in 2017, they began buying and renovating properties in rural Manitoba. He is a counselor in Harrison Park, a director at Sunrise Credit Union and Dauphin's Country Fest. He is a TEDx Winnipeg speaker of the topic of goal smashing and believes that there is an abundance of opportunity in our rural communities. Welcome, Steve.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. I see lots of familiar faces, so really appreciate the support. So for you, those of you that don't know me, my name is Steve Langston, and I'm an entrepreneur from Onondaga, Manitoba, where I live with my wife and 2 kids, Taylor and Tori. 15 years ago, I started my journey as an entrepreneur when I founded a company called Dirty T-Shirt Productions, where we use video and the internet to help tell stories online. This career has allowed me to travel all across Canada and North America extensively, and I've had a chance to visit what seems like most small communities in Western Canada through my work in the agriculture industry. 7 years ago, our family began our journey in rural Manitoba, investing in communities and taking an active interest in their success. Since then, we've purchased and rehabbed over 30 properties. I've become a counselor, credit union director, and nonprofit board member. Today, I'm here to share my story with you in hopes that it gives you a new perspective and confidence in our rural communities and the opportunity that's available there. At a macro level, there are 3 trends that are driving, oh yeah, there's Dirty T-Shirt Productions. At a macro level, there are 3 trends that are driving a rural resurgence in my eyes. Number 1 is housing affordability. For those of us that have owned homes for 20 years, you'll know what prices have done. In 2005, the average home price was $241,000. Today, it's $650,000 for a single detached home in Canada on average. And we know that wages have not kept up. Housing in rural communities in Western Canada is significantly more affordable than in major centers, but the wages aren't that much different. For teachers, laborers, operators, and farm staff, there isn't a huge wage difference between rural and urban. Number 2, safety. For those of us that happen to live in small rural communities, you'll know that they're not perfect, but we're not immune to crime. But for the most part, you can feel safe and comfortable letting your kids be free range. They can hang out at the rink, play hide and seek, and you can not be too worried about it. Safety in larger centers continues to be challenging. We see homeless encampments, shoplifting in broad daylight, and other challenging situations which can impact the sense of community. And third is high-speed internet. With the introduction of Starlink and fiber optic, as well as work-from-home trends, the ability to live and work in a rural community and access a global economy has increased substantially. So this makes living in a small town a new option for society. These 3 trends will be a driving force behind a rural resurgent. Now, every community is different, and there will always be winners and losers, but I'm here to tell you that you should have a positive outlook when thinking about the future of our rural communities. When I started on this journey and began investing in a town that you'll soon hear about, a community leader that I respected a lot told me, "We're just trying to hang on. We're trying to slow down the census as much as possible, the census decline as much as possible. And I'm here to tell you that that is the worst position and perspective to have. It's time to play offense, not defense. The number one thing standing between the success and failure of your small community is the mindset of the people that live there. And the number one thing that we can do today is to help change that mindset. If you haven't read the book 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, please do. It's had a big impact on how I think about rural communities. In that book, Doug Griffiths says, and I'll paraphrase, communities are like people. Sometimes they get depression, but it doesn't mean that they are inherently flawed. Maybe they're just going through a temporary bad time. Towns, like people, can be totally viable, but if there's an internal voice in your head saying, we're not good enough, then that will come true. There's a scene that will be forever burned into my head. My wife and I were living in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in a nice, average condo right on Westwood Drive. For the rural folk, that's right near Princess Auto as you come into the city. And we had just had our first child, Taylor. We had gotten a nice new stroller, but it was winter, and we were tired of sitting inside, and we wanted to go for a walk. So we got our fancy stroller out, put the kid in, we get out into the parking lot, and Westwood Drive, the sidewalk is just covered in snow. We can't go on it. The street's a busy 2-lane bus route, can't go there. And so we're literally sitting there, walking around, doing little circles in the parking lot. And we're dodging parked cars and moving cars, and it was horrible. A week later, we found ourselves in the small rural community of Ononol, Manitoba. We're out pushing the kid around, nice wide streets, not many people, wide open spaces, wildlife. It was peaceful and exactly what I was looking for. So who here has been to Ononol, Manitoba before? There we go, pretty popular place. So Ononol is an hour north of here, and it's kind of like Canmore of Manitoba. It's right at the gateway to the national park. And for me and thousands of others, it's our happy place that we would head to during the summer. But come September long, you would pack up and head back to the city. This is the place where I bought my first piece of real estate and where I met my wife. For the preceding 10 years, I had run my business from the lake during summers and head back to Winnipeg for the winter. I had a good network of contacts and life was good. But once we started having kids, I could feel the dream of me heading to the lake every summer quickly eroding. My wife had a good job in Winnipeg, but she wasn't convinced that she wanted to push paper for another 30 years. So, with some trepidation, we began to explore moving full-time to Ononol. So I need to introduce a friend of mine who has played a big role in my story. Oh, really need a third party running this PowerPoint. This is my friend Eric, and like me, he grew up outside of Ononol. He grew up in Winnipeg and was an outsider. He knows a lot about construction, and like me, he is hardwired to be an entrepreneur. And if you've ever played beer league hockey against Eric, you would know he is very, very persistent. So growing up, it has been fairly clear that I have been hardwired to be an entrepreneur for a long time. I grew up with rich dad, poor dad. While others were partying, we were also partying, but we were talking about business as well. One day, my phone rang, and it was Eric. He told me about a property that was coming for sale in Ononol. It needed a lot of work, but he thought I was the guy for the job. So we piled our 6-month-old daughter into the car, viewed the space, and got it under contract. Now, I had no construction experience whatsoever. Didn't own a hammer. I borrowed some tools from Eric and we started beating the hell out of this place. I hired some guys off Facebook Marketplace and we went at it. Now, I cannot overstate how green I was. I don't think they would even let me in shop class. I learned some hard and expensive lessons along the way, but 6 months later, and $100,000 more, we had finished renovating this house, and I had achieved my dream of becoming a real estate investor. The only problem was that we didn't really make any money on the project. We had a renter, but after mortgage, insurance, and taxes, we barely broke even. But we did have the real estate bug. Shortly after that, another property came on the market, and guess what? It was in horrible shape as well. It needed a gut job, but we got it under contract and ran the same process. In the end, we had another awesome spot that we still own today, but after mortgages, taxes, and insurance, it didn't make any money. It became clear that my model wasn't really that sustainable. I couldn't continue to spend lots of money to not make any money. So in classic entrepreneur fashion, I said, there has to be a better way. So back to Eric, the most persistent guy ever. He kept telling me that we need to go to Erickson, the neighboring community to the south, and thought we needed to invest there. Now, who's been to Erickson? Most of the same people that have been to Onanol. So Erickson is 10 minutes south of Onanol. It's a real town. It's where you get your groceries. And it's got a charming main street with everything that you really need. All of the businesses are basically on a central main street, which dead ends into a small lake where the Viking boat is. Erickson is a neighbor to Rolling River First Nation, which is a service provider to that community. Now, in 2019, Erickson was not in a golden era. A lot of businesses had left, including the Royal Bank, the GM dealership, Manitoba Hydro had shut down their office. There was a ton of vacancy on Main Street and a dozen or so houses on the market at any time. It was primarily a co-op town. Lumberyard, gas station, and groceries. People would come into town, do their business, and hit the road. But it's an important part of the region. It's got the only year-round grocery store, high school, etc. If you live in Onanol or that region, you end up in Erickson a lot. And I have a hard time driving past something regularly and thinking to myself, this could be a lot better, and not acting on it. One trait that has really helped me succeed as an entrepreneur is that I'm always willing to ask other smarter people their opinion on things. I'll ask for their perspective, but I don't always take it. When I asked community leaders if I should invest in Erickson, they almost all said, don't do it, man. It's a dead-end town. Grocery stores closing, I heard, etc., etc. So remember, if everyone can see the vision, there's no opportunity. So, my wife did what any rational entrepreneur would do. We started doing traffic counts. There was lots of vehicles coming in and out, but they'd get groceries and hit the road. We also realized that Erickson was getting expensive for young families, or Onanol was getting expensive for young families, and that Erickson was a viable option. Eric kept pitching me, it's a small enough town. We'll clean it up, make it cool, and it'll succeed. I told him he was insane. But eventually, he broke me down, and I said the magic words, okay, call the realtor. So, we looked at every house under $100,000, which was 8, and fell for a house that I called the co-op house, because obviously it was behind the co-op. We really liked it. It didn't need any work, and it was only $80,000. It had an attached garage and an ensuite. Two things that I had never had in my life. So I thought, okay, this is viable. We put a small for rent sign in the window and had a great family move in right away. And the best part is, we were profitable from day one. From there, we kind of blitzed it. Next was the Facebook house. Did you know in rural communities you can buy houses off Facebook Marketplace? We fixed it up again, found a lovely renter, and turned a modest profit. So we knew that there was a demand for affordable housing, but understood that Main Street needed to become occupied for the town to succeed. Another secret to revitalizing your small town is that it's important to have a spot or business in the community where you can get a quality cup of coffee or bite to eat. In Erickson, that didn't really exist at that point. It creates pride when a resident has a visitor and they can take them somewhere hip and cool, as opposed to just grabbing a Keurig from the co-op, which we all probably know about if we live in a small rural community. People from the city get nervous when they can't get a quality cup of coffee. So we found a residential house in the middle of downtown that was not loved at all. We found it charming and knew that it could be a great spot for a coffee shop and got to work. This was step one in rejuvenating the downtown. You ready for the after? This is the most remarkable one. There we go. That property today is home to a pottery shop, gluten-free bakery, and massage therapist. Now here's another doozy. This property, another great example of thinking outside of the box is the Good Street Hall, the former Ukrainian Catholic Church. I had driven past it 100 times and knew it was vacant, that no one was attending the church, and that the power had been cut. I knew that it was an unbelievable building with 30-foot ceilings and was drawn to it. If you've ever cruised around rural Western Canada, you'll know the types of buildings that I'm talking about. There was one person left in town that had a key to the space. We knew him a little bit from the community and asked him to show us the spot, and eventually were able to negotiate a deal with the diocese. The critical thing that needed to happen was that any religious iconography was to be removed and taken down. So, with the help of a Zoom boom, and did you know that you can just call the Zoom boom rental place and they'll just bring you one? Pretty cool. With the help of a Zoom boom and a pallet full of paint, we were able to make that happen. Today, the building is... All right. Today, the building is home to 2 young counselors who run Grit and Growth, which provide mental health services to the community. Outside of that, we also run concerts, weddings, and fitness classes, as well as birthdays and baby showers. It's a great example of thinking outside of the box and has brought a definite cool factor to the community. People are always thrilled to come into the space. And if you have a chance to catch yoga on a Sunday morning, there's no better way to wrap up your week. So, I want to talk a little bit about social enterprises. We're going to hear a little bit more about them later in the panel, but a social enterprise is a business that uses commercial strategies to improve social, environmental, and financial well-being. They're focused on their mission and reinvest the majority of their profits to achieve their social goals. So I want to take a minute to talk about social enterprises and why I feel like they're an important part of revitalizing your small community. In many communities, organizations kind of exist that do some social enterprises, whether it's a CDC, Rotary, Lions, or something similar. So you don't always need to start from scratch. Creating a community-owned business that makes a modest profit is critical Because if you have to spend all of your time fundraising for community initiatives, you will quickly run out of steam. We chose a thrift shop, but there are dozens of other things you could tackle, from events to social housing or others. Now, I had always been inspired by Dauphin's Country Fest. They were a longtime client of mine, and for those of you who don't know, it's an annual nonprofit event, and when it creates a profit, it would use some of that money for community initiatives. They were pivotal in bringing things like a theater, indoor pool, and many other community assets to Dauphin. My wife and I were discussing ways that we could raise funds for the daycare that had just started out. We tossed around the usual ideas of chocolate bars or pizza fundraisers, but nothing really got me fired up. I sensed that it would be as much work to create a social enterprise that makes money as opposed to fundraising for a one-off project. And that is how the SCORE store was born. SCORE stands for Sandy Lake, Clear Lake, Onanol, Rolling River First Nation, and Erickson. Around the same time, my friend Eric had purchased the old pharmacy, which had been vacant for 5 years. In early January of 2020, we got incorporated, put a lease on the property, and started working. We did a good job of communicating what we were doing, and people bought in. They started helping with renovations, donating money, and taking ownership. The SCORE store began operating right in the middle of the pandemic, and people bring their gently used goods in as donations, and we were off to the races. There are so many benefits besides the profit that it makes. It diverts from the landfill, offers volunteer and employment opportunities, and offers locals local clothing, housewares, etc. And it also drives people to the community to go thrifting. Main Street is noticeably busier on the days the SCORE store is open. So it's easy to get down on the world and read the headlines and think that everything's negative. But when I walk through the SCORE store on a Tuesday and there's a group of volunteers all working together for the advancement of our community, it's truly heartwarming. And I'm sure it's one of the best thrift shops in rural Manitoba. The SCORE store is open Thursdays from noon to 5 and Saturdays from 10 to 2. We wanted to train people to come in during the limited hours to make sure it wasn't onerous to staff and volunteers. And to date, it's been a huge success. And I have to mention the hardworking volunteers that make it all happen. Every year, we make a nice profit, and 50% goes out in cash, and the other 50% goes to what I call economic development activities. So the first economic development project that we started with was called the SCORE Store Business Incubator, which worked to address the vacancy on Main Street. The SCORE store chucked in $5,000, the municipality did the same, and Sunrise Credit Union, North Star Insurance, and Community Futures put in another 10 total. We devised a plan that would offer businesses 50% off rent for the first year if they operated in an underused or vacant building. So it's easy for a community or council to say, hey, this would be a great place for you to start a business. But this program made us put our money where our mouth was and was critical in getting 2 buildings completely fixed up, and it helped launch 5 businesses, including a bakery, microgreens business, and others. Not working, but we'll keep rolling, Ronnie. So since then, the SCORE Store Business Incubator easily drove $500,000 of investment into our community. And since then, we've started writing we've started writing grants, which has been really positive. We will hire grant writers to write applications on behalf of the SCORE Store or other nonprofits in the area. One day, our grant writer reached out to us and said that there was a grant for greenhouses and food security hubs in rural communities. At that point, our food bank was operating out of the Score store, and we knew it was bursting at the seams. So we hired the grant writer for a few $1,000s. A few months later, we received word that the project and application was successful, and we ended up with funds from the federal government to build a new food security hub and greenhouse. This project brought $300,000 into the community and has a brand new building where a vacant lot once was. More recently, we started writing grants for a park at the end of Main Street, and we've been able to raise over $300,000 for that park, which includes mountain bike trails, lookouts, and boardwalks. Since its inception, the Score store has driven over $1 million in investment in the small rural community of Erickson. Now, the state of Erickson has changed considerably in 5 years. Before, you could get a Keurig from the co-op, and now you can get a tattoo, a haircut, a slice of pizza, or ceramics. There's also counseling services and many other businesses. And there's virtually 100% occupancy on Main Street. Real estate prices have gone up, and people are investing in their houses. And the municipality is fixing infrastructure as opposed to just patching it. When you drive down Main Street, it's busy, vibrant, and people are proud of their community. So, what does this mean for you, someone who's passionate about our rural communities? Every community is different, and there is no one-size-fits-all solution to rural revitalizations. How can you take my lessons and apply them to a town near you? Here are some key takeaways. Number one, act as an outsider. It's so easy for us to drive past the same things for 20 years and not be able to see what the opportunity is. I challenge you to look at your community through the eyes of a visitor. I live in the town of Ononol, where I'm also a counselor. The playbook that worked in Erickson will not work at Ononol for a lot of reasons. Number one reason is the proximity to a national park drives up prices on everything. So it's hard to buy old buildings and fix them up. In my eyes, Ononol's big challenge was the lack of a walkable downtown of any sorts. The community centers around Highway 10, so it's challenging to get your kids to and from school, and it doesn't make it incredibly welcoming for tourists on a bike or e-bike. We gave it a ton of analysis and came up with a plan to put limestone paths throughout the community. We got a grant from Trails Manitoba and hope that this trail system, as part of the Trans-Canada Trail, will drive investment in the community. And that was a big investment by the municipality of Harrison Park. So this process really requires you to be objective. What are the barriers in my community? It could be affordable housing, your downtown, a lack of daycare, or safety. How can we solve the problems and grab the low-hanging fruit? Today, I've seen groups in Erickson go up and down Main Street with notebooks and look at the entire downtown critically. What needs to change? What can be freshened up? What does the community need? Having that list allows you to be objective and stay focused. Number two, work with your council and other existing groups. It's important to work with others because it's important to work with others and your local government. And sometimes you even need to go to the dark side and get elected. Sometimes councils and nonprofits need help seeing the vision that's in front of them, but they're usually willing to entertain good ideas. Have a vision and communicate it. People like feeling like they're a part of the changes. And the more you share, the more people are going to likely jump on board. Number three, housing. Affordable housing is a challenge in every community in Canada. But our rural communities are unique compared to major centers. I have a saying, if you love your small town, fix up your house and make it a rental. So in Brandon, when vacancy gets to a certain level, the developers just show up and build a 48-plex, but assuming no land constraints. But in a rural community, there is virtually zero vacancy because nobody can rationalize building from scratch. It doesn't make financial sense. The only way to add housing to the stock is to fix what's currently there. A project that we're really proud of is the Minnedosa Tribune building and the one next door that we call Einstein's. They were formerly vacant and condemned properties that we have renovated, adding 6 residential units and 5 commercial spots that host 8 small businesses. I won't bore you with all the numbers, but we were able to get them renovated to as-new standards at half of the price of building new or better. This adds 6 or more families to the community that can work in the businesses and eventually move in full-time. In so many rural communities, you can purchase a house affordably, do the work that nobody else wants to do, and someone will rent that from you, pay you a fair rate, which makes the community stronger. Along the way, you hire local trades and give confidence to the market. Number 4, commercial buildings. Things work different in rural Manitoba. If you're fixing up a commercial spot in the city, you typically would fix it up to the vanilla box, just drywall and flooring. We've had a lot of success taking existing commercial buildings and chopping them up into 200 to 300 foot office spaces where people can run a small business from. Most hairdressers don't really have the ability or desire to do construction. They just want a spot to do their thing. So when we renovate a commercial building, we want to make it turnkey and ready for the small business to move in. And we also like to make them what we know the community needs. If we know the community needs a cafe, we'll fix it up, put a till in, and make it turnkey. Because most small business owners do not want to manage construction, and I don't blame them. Now, number 5, make your banker your friend. We got both my bankers here in the crowd, Connor and Devin. A lot of love for those guys. We do these things called property tours every 6 months, and I had the bright idea that we would go snowmobiling last weekend and take them out and show them some of these properties, and I got us lost about 4 times. Then I lost my cell phone in the middle of a field, and they maintained a really positive attitude and even rode alone this week. So got to be friends with your bankers. It's totally critical. Credit unions are a great spot, but you do have to find the right person within that organization. Learn how to write a break-even analysis or projected income statement. These projects aren't rocket science, but you have to be able to use the numbers to create a vision for your project. And stay positive. Don't get bogged down in negativity. The communities that we work in, for the most part, have been super positive, but sometimes it can be frustrating. Someone badmouths your project on Facebook, and it makes you think, I'm out of here. But remember, that attitude is what likely held the community back in the first place. You can't soar with the eagles if you're arguing with the turkeys, or something like that. And number 7, consider starting a social enterprise. Social enterprises help provide ongoing funding for your projects. I believe it's easier to start a thrift shop than to have enough hot dog barbecue fundraisers to pay for your dog park or splash pad. So that is my talk on rural revitalization. I've also written a book that is 99% done, and this is the first time I'm going to send it out to the public. So if you guys want to hit that QR code, you can read it for free. Just tell me what you think and if there's any glaring holes. So we've got about 8 minutes left, so I would love a chance to take some questions and answers from the floor. I know we got a lot of passionate people about rural Manitoba here, so who has a question about rural revitalization? Here we go. Okay. Here we go. Someone else queue up a couple more here for us. Right there, straight up.
Should be. There you go.
Thank you. That's a really interesting talk. I'm on the committee of a CDC in small town rural Manitoba. Our problem is that we just don't have any housing, and as you said, it's too expensive to build because it's worth less once built than it costs to build it. Any good ideas to help us? Because we have the employment, we just don't have anywhere for anyone to live.
Yeah, I think about a couple things. Number one, how many vacant plots of land is there in your community? Often in these rural communities, there's a lot of excess land. And when you look at kind of the cost to build in a kind of a place like Brandon, you're looking at like $100,000 to $200,000. So, you take that out of the equation on a fourplex, you're automatically $50,000 less. And then I would be looking at things like that business incubator model, like how can we really remove the risk for a developer, right? And so you don't need to do it for free, but if you can guarantee that lease, or if you can, potentially do a property tax abatement, those things, it's that last 10% that often really makes a project either viable or not viable. So I would really be looking at that. And then the real problem in a lot of these communities is actually a lack of entrepreneurship. It's a lack of people that like truly understand it and can have that risk profile and that are willing to spend that money. So I think, it only takes one or two people or one or two families that are really fired up. So I think if you can, number one, get free land, number two, look at no property taxes, and number three, work with industry or others to guarantee that rent or maybe just top it up just a little bit, I think you would be surprised at what might happen. Who else? Here we go.
Keep going.
I know your area very well. Give me your impression of the little tiny home just sitting just in an Onondaga there. I look at it, it's cute, it's small. To me, it's very expensive, but give me your view on that.
Oh, I know that property very well. So basically, it's what I would call like a bougie trailer. It's probably 600 square feet. Yeah, I guess you really just have to think about what does it cost to deliver that style of housing. At 600 square feet, you're probably $250 a square foot. There's a large part of the market that just puts a huge value on turnkey and not really needing to do that. They're also willing to pay a premium for things that look really good. So, I think that there's a lot of value in the prefab house. I think that smaller is often better, especially when we're thinking about smaller communities. So, I think that there is an opportunity for that style of house. I think that our municipalities need to really understand their zone. To understand their zoning and provide that accessibility to the community, because in a lot of places it's like it's a trailer park, we don't want it, but we do need to be thinking about that. So I guess the response is, if you think you can build that quality of house a lot better and a lot cheaper, then giddy up. But I think there's certainly a place for them in the market. Anyone else? Yeah, here we go. We got 3 minutes left, so yeah, you're getting your work in, aren't you?
Next time, someone over here.
Sorry, making you walk back and forth. This might be too specific for the general audience. It can be deferred till later. I'm wondering if you have any advice with churches and your experience working with the Archdiocese and how those particular structures can be preserved and used to build the community?
Sure. Yeah. So, we've bought both a church and a church camp. So we've done a fair bit of, work with religious organizations to buy real estate. The number one thing that they're worried about is they don't want to put it on the general market because then they can't control what happens to it. When we're working with the Ukrainian Catholics, they had stories about, selling a church in the middle of a rural community and not being very happy about what happened to it. So the number one thing is to build trust. So whether it's with the last local people or whoever's there or at a provincial level, you really just need to build trust with them, because for the most part, a lot of these churches are sitting with a lot of vacancy, right? And they're just they don't know what to do with it. Even knocking it down is too much. So, number one thing, paper an offer, right? Put an offer on paper. Doesn't need to be crazy, but it needs to be something, right? So it's not for free. And they'll look at it for sure, because eventually how many vacant buildings can you have scattered around the prairie? So the number one thing is to build that trust so that they know when that deal happens that you're not going to embarrass them. Okay, we got time for one more if anyone's got it. Do we got one more or no? Okay, I would sincerely like to thank everyone for coming out and thinking about our rural communities. You can find me online. My Instagram is Workenstock. It's like Birkenstock with work in front of it, because we always used to do construction in sandals. So you can follow along there, or all major social platforms. So thank you everyone for your time and interest in rural communities. Right after this, we're going to be doing a panel with 3 entrepreneurs talking about the food rescue, grocery store, on-farm milling operation, and a farm direct beef vending machine in a rural community. So should be very interesting. We'll get that going in just 2 minutes. Thank you.